Hi, this is Larry, and today I'm going to be changing the cam belt on my 1993 Suzuki Cappuccino, which has a K6A motor in it. And when you change the cam belt, they also recommend that you change the water pump, the cam pulley seals, the crankshaft seals, and the tensioner. And this should be done every 50,000 miles or 5 years. I'll have a link to these parts in the description below. I picked up the parts in Japan, and I'll give you a link where you can get those parts. Just check in the video description, and I'll leave it there. Anyway, here's the cam belt. Here's the water pump, and it's good for any F6A engine apparently. So there's twin cam like on the Suzuki Cappuccino, or just on the Suzuki Carry, which uses a single cam. Here's the new alternator belt and air conditioner belt. These are some brake pads. I'll do that later. And here are the seals. Apparently all the crank pulley seal and the cam pulley seals are all identical apparently. I'll show you what these look like. Like that. And then finally you're supposed to change the tensioner, the belt tensioner on the cam belt. This is all should be done when changing the timing belt. So you have to go there again. The other reason why I'm changing my cam belt is because you probably can't tell easily from here, but I have a leak in my coolant system. I'm losing coolant a little bit every week, and it's almost certainly coming from the water pump, which is probably leaking, as it's not in the oil, and I can see it seeping out of the sides there. To get started, you're going to have to remove all of the plumbing, like the intercooler tubing, the air box and tubing, and then a bit of the other tubing in front to get at the cam belt cover. You'll notice that I've removed my bumper, but that's because I'm putting on a new one. The other one I had was broken, so I already have the new bumper, but I took it off because it'll make getting in and around the car much easier without it while I do this job. Before I get started, I actually downloaded the instructions on how to do this at two places. One is Score, which is a Suzuki Cappuccino Owners Club, and you can just look for that on Google, and they have an explanation on how they did it, as well as the service manual, which is available in English because this car was sold in England. And so both have very concise instructions. The nice thing about the service manual is it gives you all of the torque settings, so you know how much to torque the timing belt, etc. So I would recommend you definitely get those before you get started, and you can find them online at either on the Facebook groups for the Cappuccino owners or the online groups like Score. The first thing I'm going to want to do is to empty the radiator of its radiator fluid, but before I can do that, I have to remove the under tray. It's a plastic under tray, and there's 10 millimeter bolts right here. So I'll remove that, and then after that I can get to the bottom of the radiator to empty it out. I have removed the plastic tray underneath, and now I can access the radiator. If you look here, it's not so clear. You can see on mine, you can turn that and easily empty the radiator, which I'll be starting in a few minutes. I have a catch can under the radiator, and then I'm going to reach over and untwist the radiator. Here it comes out, as you can see. Now, only a little is coming out because I haven't taken off the radiator cap, which I'm going to do now. It should start flowing with earnest, as you can see. Please to make sure you always dispose of the radiator fluid properly, as it's quite dangerous, especially for animals. And I'm going to let this drain. I'll get back to you. To make the job easier, you're supposed to drop the sway bar, or the anti-roll bar, which is right here. There's 4 bolts. I think they're 12 millimeter, and I'll remove that right now. And that'll make the job much easier. So the belts are a little tight. I sprayed them with some 10W40 to loosen them up, and then I'm going to slowly remove them. No point in watching me do this. I'll show you when I'm done, but you get an idea how to do it. Once I got the bar out of the way, I actually took the rubber bushings off because they were loose, and I put it back on in place so that I don't lose them. I'll probably clean them up as well once I'm done. Once the roll bar is out of the way, you can see you can get pretty good access, but I need to get access from the top as well. So the next step is going to be removing the air box and the intercooler pipes. Here are the intercooler pipes, and the first step is to loosen the Jubilee clips on all four sides as well as the air box down here, and I'll just pull them off. You don't need to watch the whole process. One thing I'm going to do, instead of removing the Jubilee clips, I'm going to just move them to the center and then tighten down a little bit so that I don't lose them and I can remember which one goes where. Once you remove the hose, you're going to want to make sure you have a clean sock or a rag or a paper towel and shove it in the intake so no dirt gets in there. I removed the air box, but I'm actually going to move it from there to give it a little more space. And then I'll also put a rag in there to protect it from getting any foreign object in it. The next step is going to remove the top radiator hose from the thermostat housing. And so you're just going to have to squeeze this clip in and remove it. And I'll give you an idea what I do here. So just grab it here. And I'm going to move it, and then I'm just going to put it out of the way. Basically, we're trying to clear. Here, let me go work on that one. Okay, now I'm just going to pull it out, and I'm going to put the hose out of the way. If I can shove it in the housing here, that's fine. Yeah, there you go. That should stay. And then the next step is going to be getting rid of these hoses. So I'm going to start by loosening these clips here on the rubber pipes so I can remove them. And then I'm going to do the same on the other side, and then I'll be able to pull the rubber part out. As you see, I can get most of the hoses removed here, the bottom ones removed. I just have one more on the bottom. I got this one out. And then I have one more on the bottom just below the fan belt that I have to get. And then the parts will come off with the cover. Next, I'm going to loosen the air conditioner compressor to get the belts off. And to do that, I need to get to a little screw, which you can see right there at the top. I think that's a 10 or 12 millimeter. And I'm going to loosen that, and then there's two screws on the bottom I'll show you. And then I'll be able to move the compressor to remove the belt. Okay, I have the 12 millimeter in there, and I'm going to slowly start loosening it. And I'm not going to, I just have to loosen it a little. You don't have to take it all the way off. Just enough to loosen it so that it can move in the slot down there, which I'm not sure if you can see. Almost done. Just a little more. That's enough right there. And then I'll move to the bottom. You probably can't see it well, but underneath is the bolt, and I'm just going to unloosen it a little bit. You can't really see that, but I'm going to loosen it just a little bit, not completely, maybe about 2 more turns, and then that'll be loose enough to move the belt. So once you loosen those bolts, you should be able to move the compressor. You can probably see it moving a little bit, and then we should be able to pop off the belt. I'll work it off. You don't have to watch me work it off. Okay, I got the air conditioner belt off, and then next is going to be the alternator belt. Make sure that you label the belt so you don't mix them up. The alternator is essentially 2 screws. There's a bottom one right here, which you can probably see right there, and then there's a top one. The bottom one you just unloosen a little bit so it can pivot, and then this is a 14 and the top one's a 12, and I'll show you that shortly. Next, we undo or just loosen the top bolt on the alternator here. You can see where I am here. Don't have to take it out, but we just loosen it. Probably can't see that very well. Anyway, you loosen that bolt right there, and then the whole thing will move. And I've actually loosened it already. You can just squeeze and knock the belt right off, and you can probably see I'm getting the belt off as we speak. I'll work it off. Next is the dipstick, and you can undo it by undoing a 10mm bolt right on the cam belt cover, and then the dipstick should just pull out, and if you haven't used your car, the oil shouldn't leak. That's a big if. As you can see, I undid the bolt, and then I'm just going to grab the dipstick and it'll come right out. Keep it somewhere clean. Next to come off is the pulley. I've actually already had it removed. It's a 17mm bolt, and we used an impact wrench to remove it already. I actually removed the fan belt housing so we can get the tool in there. There's a few ways to do it. I had a pulley holder, but we tried this impact wrench first, and it worked great. And so anyway, you pull it off, and now we can remove the cam belt cover. There you go. Next is the cam belt. These are 10mm. You can remove this one. You probably can't see it well because of the sun, but there's one here. There's another bolt right down there, and there's two on the bottom as well. And I'll go remove these right now. Once you've taped off all the 5 bolts and nuts that hold on the cam belt cover, there's one here. There's actually 2 down on this side, and there's another one on that side. Then you can take off you can remove the tube. There's a great opportunity to clean them, and then you can take the cam belt cover off. Once you remove all 6 bolts, there's 1, 2, 3 here, and 1, 2, 3 on the other side of the cam belt cover, and then there's 2 nuts here. Once you remove them all, that's a total of 8. The belt comes right off. The cover comes right off, and then we can see the belt. So, belt actually looks okay. Let me work this off. It's still caught on here. I'll get right back after I remove it. Okay, I've removed the cam belt pulley cover, and then you can see the cam belt. It's actually not in bad condition, although it's filthy. You don't want to have any oil in here. I found some oil on the bottom, so I think I have a leak at the very bottom of my the cam belt, so I was going to change that seal anyway. So next thing I have to do is you can either put the pulley back on or just use a ratchet, and you're going to turn the belt so that these nicks here are top dead center with these lines right here. Mine are already white, but you want to turn it so that these are dead center at the top, and then you'll see a line on the bottom, the same thing. It has to be at the top. So I'll go rotate that now. I just put the pulley screw back in, and I'm just using the ratchet to turn it to top dead center. One thing, if you have it in gear, make sure you take it out so it turns. And that's it. You can see I'm getting it close. Looks about right. I'll go check the top to see if I'm close. You can see they're in line. You'll notice that the punch marks, there's a little dot here, this notch, and then there's an arrow up top. They're all in line. Also, you'll notice that the key, the very bottom, there's a little key that comes up. That should be pointing up as well. And that should be top dead center, and it is. And so I think we're set. I actually have a cam belt holder, a cam pulley holder, but I'm going to remove the cam pulleys to change the seals. I put in cam pulley holders just to hold them in place, but I'm gonna have to remove them because I'm gonna take these cams off anyway to get to the seals. First thing you have to do is you have to remove the tensioner. Normally you can just loosen the tensioner with a 12mm, but normally you replace. If you're gonna keep it, you just loosen it. But since I'm gonna replace it, I'm gonna take the whole thing off. With the tensioner belt loose, I'm going to remove it later. You can see that the belt moves. I'm going to remove the belt now. I'm going to slowly pry it off. Wow, actually this belt's worse than I thought. Good thing I did remove it. It's got little, you can see like wear cracks in it. I'm going to start on this side. You probably can't see well. Anyway, I'm going to work it off. And I don't think you guys need to see me doing this, but you can see it's coming off. Well, I got it anyway, so. And the belt will come off. Ta-da! Okay, it's a good thing I actually removed this. This belt was pretty bad. You can tell there's like it's starting to perish, so little lines in it. Okay, and now I'm going to actually remove the bottom pulley, the tensioner, the water pump. So I'll get started. I'm going to start first with the water pump. I actually decided to remove the tensioner. I have the new one right here, and there's a little spring. The spring goes to the screw right there. I don't know if you can see that screw right there. You put the spring on there, and then you'll just bolt it back in. So I'll go do that right now. And it's just one bolt. It's very easy. Once you have the spring on, it kind of holds it in place, and then there's a little pin. Just make sure the pin goes in there and bolt it back in. It's that easy. Okay, got the cam pulleys off, and we have the this is coming off as well too. I actually used a pulley, but I got it off. The key is still on there. Make sure the key stays there, and that key means top dead center. Same thing with this. You have little nibs on the bottom, and if those are on the bottom, you're fine. Okay, now I'm going to take the cam cover off. We're going to remove these 10mm bolts. There's 4 of them, and once I get them off, I'll take the cover off, and then I can get to the seals. Okay, now that I've removed the front cover, I can now get to the water pump, and I unscrewed the last bolt here, and now it just comes off, and I can screw the new one on. To be honest, the water, it looks good, but there's no seal. That's why it's leaking, huh? Oh well, they never put a seal on it, so that's probably why it leaked. Before I install the new pump, I'm going to clean off all the edges because they put silicone on it. And then I'll install the new pump. I've applied the gasket. I've added some silicone to the surface first after cleaning it. Now I'm going to put on the water pump, which just goes on like that. Well, I was able to get all the bolts in for the water pump. I also torqued everything down. And now I have to change the seals. And I'm running out of light. You're supposed to be able to just, I cleaned up the seal around the seal already, and then you can just use one of these to pull it out. Be careful, you don't want to scratch anything, but you're supposed to be able to just pull it out with this. Hi, I still can't get I couldn't use that tool to get the seal out because it's pretty hard, which means it's somewhat perished, probably why it's leaking. So I'm going to use what's called the screw method. You drill a hole and then you put a screw in it. If that doesn't work, there's actually a seal removal tool, which I was reluctant to buy because I'm only going to use it a little bit, but we'll try the screw method where I drill a hole in it and then pull it out, and then we'll go from there. My neighbor Michael again saved my butt. He's putting the screw in. The seal is really hard, so it's a lot of work to get it out, but we've got one side out and now we're working on the other. Okay, I've gotten the seal off using the screw, and then now I lubed up the other seal with grease and I'm putting it back on. It was a little bit tough to get it over this lip, and then I'm going to just push it in slowly, and I'm going to use this socket which fits over here to slowly press it in evenly.
What size socket is that?
I'm using 1 1/4 inch socket. So that seems to work pretty well, but there's other sockets that might work as well. As you can see, we were able to get the crankshaft seal in there. I just had to use the hammer and just made sure it was even on all sides, and it seems like it's working and it went in well. And now we're going to go work. We may work on the I'm cleaning up the seals right now. They actually look in pretty good shape, so I might not replace them. After checking the Cambelt or the Cam Pulley seals, they're in quite good shape. So we think the problem was caused because they didn't put enough sealant on the or gasket sealant when they installed the water pump. So hopefully we've remedied that. So we're gonna start putting it back together in reverse order. Essentially, we're done. I'll go through parts that I'm putting back together, like the belt tensioner and things like that. But we're going to start reassembling the motor and then go from there. I just screwed the spring, that little screw there. I just screwed it in. I just want to make sure you don't forget to use Loctite and all the bolts. Anything in here, you don't want it to come loose or it'll cause major headaches. So use Loctite on all of these screws here. Things holding on the back cam belt cover, the springs, all the screws and bolts, so things don't come loose. Hi, as you can see, I've already snaked the timing belt through the bottom part over the pulley, the tensioner pulley, and the water pump, and I already put in the crank pulley, and then so I have to just tighten up the timing belt pulleys, which have to be tightened to 50 to 60 newton meters or 5 to 6 kilogram meters. So I'm going to do that now. I have a holder in here, but I'm also going to use a special holder that I rented from O'Reilly's to hold the cam belt, or hold the cam pulleys in place while I tighten them up. Don't forget to use Loctite on this. You can see I've got the crank pulley holder tool set up. I rented from O'Reilly Auto Parts, and I've got my torque wrench set. So I'll go tighten this bolt down. I've also got the cam belt, or the cam holders in place just to be safe. Cam pulley holders. Alright, you can see I have the cam pulley holder on the second cam pulley, and I'm going to torque it up. I'm going to install the cam belt now. You can see I've got the tensioner on and the spring is attached there, and that's pretty easy, but it's very loose, and I'll tighten that once I get the belt on. I'm going to start from the bottom, and I'm going to actually thread it through around the tensioner, which goes, sorry, this just does not give a good thing. It goes around the tensioner, around the pulley, over the cam belt and down. I'm going to start from this side because you want to make the straight side here as tight as possible. So the belt going straight up. So I'll work on that. Bye. Okay, I've got it threaded through the bottom, and now I'm going to work it onto the top cam pulley. I'm going to work it around, and I'm going to start on this side, see how tight I can get it. If I can just lift it up one, I'll be really good. There we go. And then the hard part's going to be pulling it around here. And then I'm going to turn it off while I play with the tensioner and pull it around. And I pulled on the belt here and pushed on the tensioner right down here, so I was able to get it over the lip. And then I just make sure it sits. and then you have to make sure everything's top dead center. Okay, now I've got the cam belts on everything, and now I just have to tension it down here. So this is too loose, so I'm going to use the tensioner to tighten up. And then you've got to rotate the crank a whole bunch of like twice at least through, all the way through, to make sure that the tensioner, the belt is properly tensioned after you've played with the tensioner. Okay, I've actually put my cam shaft bolt in there, pulley bolt, and I've rotated I rotated two full rotations at the top. That's 4 at the bottom, and I have about a 1/4 inch deflection, which is about what you want, 1/4 inch to a half, and then I've tightened down the tensioner, so I've got it exactly where I want. The most important thing is that it's top dead center on both sides, and also at the bottom. You can see by the key that it's top dead center there. There's also a white dot, which you can't see. Anyway, so now it's ready. The cam belt's done, and now it's ready to button up. Next, we're working in reverse order. I'm going to put the cam cover back on, the cam belt cover back on. Don't forget, though, that you got to put the dipstick and the cross pipes in while you're doing it. So you put the cam belt, cam cover on, then put the cross pipes and the dipstick in, and then tighten it up. First, I've got the cross pipe in place. I have already placed the dipstick as well, and then I just have to bolt them in, make sure everything's nice and tight, and then off to the the air conditioning and alternator pulley. Next is the pulley for the alternator and fan bolt pulley, or the crankshaft pulley, which I have right here. And I'll just shove it in with the key, make sure it's in line. I've already finished up the cam belt cover and made sure all the pipes and all the coolant hoses are reattached correctly. Let's get that on. I'll get that on just like this. Probably can't see that very well, but just gotta rotate that to the key. There we go. That's in. And then I just screw that in. I'm going to put the car in reverse so I can torque this up. Okay, let me go get the torque wrench. Okay, I've torqued down the fan, or the alternator and fan and AC or crankshaft pulley. It's between 65 and 75 Newton meters of torque. Next is the belts. I'm going to do the alternator belt first because that's the inboard one, and then the air conditioner compressor belt after that. Sorry, you can't see that very well over there. And I'll start with the alternator belt first, and it's just a standard alternator belt installation. All right, put on the belt, and you're just looking for about a half an inch of deflection here, which is about what I've got right here. And then there's two bolts on top. Tighten adjust it where you adjust it first, and then the bolt where it pivots after. All right, I've completely tightened up the alternator belt, and it's got about 1 inch of deflection. Now I'm working on the air conditioner belt, and the same thing. You can actually move. You can see the compressor move here. You can just move it, and there's a bolt right in the back, which you probably can't see, right behind this pipe. I'll try to point to it. Anyway, you tighten that up to adjust it, and then there's two bolts on the bottom that it pivots on that you tighten up when you're done. Again, only a half inch of deflection. Okay, both belts are back on. They're tightened up. Now it's time to button up everything with the cooling system and put back the intercooler pipes. Make sure I remove all of the socks and everything, and paper towels so they don't clog anything. Next, don't forget to button up the sway bar, and you just put that in its place and screw it in, and then after that I got to just do the intercooler pipes and the air pipe, and then fill up the radiator. Okay, going to put the air box back in and the intercooler pipes. Alright, she's all buttoned up, but I actually am going to run a compression test just to make sure we didn't screw anything up with the valves or bend a valve when we tried to take off the cam pulleys. And if everything looks good, we're going to start her up. I'm going to be refilling with radiator fluid, and I've just put a catch underneath just in case I miss something and it leaks. So make sure you do that before you fill it up, and you fill it up until it stops taking fluid, and then you have to run the car for a bit to get all the air out, but you can watch a video on how to do that. The car's running. It seems to be running fine. Needs gas. We're gonna run it a little bit to fill the radiator cap, and we'll go from there. Well, okay, so I just put on the bumper so I could test drive it, and yeah, everything works great. Timing belt, everything is working normally. Just check the fluids. I had to fill it up a few times, but it's all good. Everything works great.